Hey YouTube, welcome back to another video. We're really excited today. I say that every time, but honestly we really are. It's one of those things where sometimes you do the research and you get a little bit tired, but we really are getting excited about fantasy. I mean, we just had the first preseason games. We're starting to see some football for this year, and I couldn't be any more excited. I use that word a lot, but I mean hype, that's what it is. It's here, guys. Now we're in the heart of drafting season, and a lot of news are coming out, and we're just starting to, everyone's starting to get active. You have hardcore fans who stay all off season, but some people are now starting to join people who are a little bit less committed. So here we are now. We're really hitting the heart of fantasy season. And today we just wanted to bring to you guys 6 breakout players for this season. 6 players who weren't that good last year, but will certainly improve and do much better. Rob, why don't you give us a definition and clarify some things and just talk about what does it mean to be a breakout player?
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that we have learned on videos here, that we need to define what we mean by our the very video or the definitions we're using. The idea of a breakout player is pretty vague. That could mean a lot of things. So we did some research, we looked around different sites and kind of what they use. And here's the definition we got from a number of different sites. Here's what they call a breakout player, okay? It's a fantasy player who has been ineffective or marginal in the past, who suddenly becomes a fantasy stud one year. Breakout players happen every year in fantasy football. Now the question for us is to figure out who those are going to be. And those are guys that are usually sleepers, late steals, guys that you can really build your team on, figuring out who these breakout players are. So that's our definition.
Yeah, exactly. I think that the heart of any good fantasy football lineup is built with these breakout players, is built with players who are underrated or built with sleepers. Anyone can go in the first round and pick the right guy, right? Those top 12 guys are easy. You got to be able to find talents rounds 6, 7, rounds 10, 12, round 15. And so that's what we're here today, talk about some people who are going to far outperform what they did last year. And your friends who haven't been here all offseason and don't know football that well, they're going to certainly overlook them. So let's get started, Rob. Who's your first player?
So my first breakout player is wide receiver Coleman of the Buffalo Bills. As a lot of you probably know, he got traded from Cleveland to Buffalo. But I'll talk about why I think he's going to be a breakout player this year. First of all, he's a former first-round pick, 15th overall. Let's take a look at his pedigree a little bit. Does this guy have the talent to be a breakout player? Well, if you look at college as a sophomore, he appeared in 10 games. During that time, recorded 64 catches, 1,119 yards, and 11 TDs. Yeah, pretty good year. Comes out his senior year, right? He finishes that year with 74 catches, 1,363 yards, and 20 touchdowns. Okay? He capped that year off by winning the Fred Blitnikoff Award, which is for the best wide receiver in the nation. So he had a great pedigree in college. But does that translate into the pro level? Because there's a lot of guys that can win awards like that in college, but when it's all said and done, that doesn't necessarily translate to the pro level. Well, did it for him. We'll go back to 2016 as a rookie in his second game, right? As a rookie, he goes out there, gets 5 catches, 104 yards, and 2 TDs against Jimmy Smith and the Ravens. It's a pretty good game. 2017, right? He comes out, he starts very well against the Steelers. First game against the Steelers, he has 5 catches, 53 yards, and a TD. And those were not garbage time statistics. That game finished 21-18. Cleveland almost beat Pittsburgh that game. So those were solid numbers and a solid game. The very next game last year, he gets injured. He doesn't come back until November. First game back in November, he had 6 catches and 80 yards. That's a really nice game, right? Mm-hmm. Then the game after that, he hits 4 targets, 0 yards, but that was the first game that Josh Gordon was finally back on the playing field. And so Josh Gordon sees 11 targets that game. And the reason why I kind of bring that up is that if you look at this guy, college, when he's been healthy, when he's been on the field, this guy has a pedigree and talent to be successful. He's a guy that could definitely break out. What's held this guy back then? If he's got the talent, if he had the pedigree, he's a first-round pick, what held him back? Well, ultimately it's been injuries. Coleman broke his hand in practice, missed nearly 2 months his rookie season, so that never really got off the ground. He started off well there, broke his hand. Broke the same hand 2 games in 2017, so he's broke that hand twice, right? Now, some might say, okay, well, with those injuries, maybe that's an indication that he's injury prone. But those are what I would call fluky injuries. This is not like a knee injury or back injury. These are ones that I think are definitely fluky. I think that you can trust that he can move past that and be healthy. Everything points to him being able to be successful at the pro level when he's healthy and on the field. Now, he's had a little success, but I think that success is even more magnified if you consider that he played for Cleveland. Just be honest. What little success he did have, we consider the quarterback that was throwing the ball and the situation he was in, really magnifies that success, what little he had. Now he has a change of scenery, and for a lot of guys, that's what it is. I think about the Sheryl Crow song, you probably don't know her, but she has a line that says, "A change will do you good." And I think for Corey Coleman, that's exactly what he needs to be successful. So he leaves a bad situation, and now you could argue I know someone disagrees with me on this one, but you could argue that he's the best wide receiver on the Bills roster. A lot of people say it's Calvin Benjamin. If you look at Calvin Benjamin's career, he's underachieved. He's often been overweight. That's been a major knock against him in his career, especially for the Panthers. And he has a propensity for drop balls. In fact, he's got a very high drop pass rate in his career. Another thing I think that's concerning for Calvin Benjamin, right? Okay, so last year the Panthers, they had a good season, and they were in contention for the division. They were in contention for the playoff. And right in the middle of all that, they trade away their wide receiver. Like, that tells me an awful lot about where they see him, where his talent's at. Now, the rumors were that Cleveland traded away Coleman because he didn't fit right, because they didn't like his attitude and his work ethic. Okay, so let me say this right there. The Browns traded him away because they didn't like Corey Coleman's. They didn't like his attitude and work ethic. Can the Browns really be trusted to make that judgment, honestly? I mean, to think they traded him away because they didn't like that. Okay, let's just look at who they've got left. They got Josh Gordon. Issues? Do I need to say anything about that? Like, issues there? Okay. I like Josh Gordon, by the way, but he's got issues. They brought in a loud and boisterous Landry. Okay, Jarvis Landry is a guy that was very successful in Miami, yet the Dolphins didn't want to bring him back. Tells you a little bit something about him, right? And then they traded away Coleman and replaced him with Callaway, who, by the way, had a really good first preseason game, looked really good, right? Hours after they trade away Coleman, Callaway gets pulled over and he gets cited by the cops. They found a small amount of marijuana in the driver's seat. Okay, he was cited for possession of marijuana, driving with a suspended license. They found gun parts and bullets in his car. If you go back to 2017, the entire year he was suspended for credit card fraud. Okay, he was cited for marijuana possession and part of an investigation into sexual battery in 2016. But apparently, Coleman has issues. Like, come on, this is just a faux pas that you know the Browns are going to make a mistake. Like, you just know because the Browns are who they are, this guy will probably go on to be an all-pro this year because that's just the way Cleveland is. With that said, I look at Corey Coleman, new situation. He's got the talent. He's got the opportunity. I think this is the year that he breaks out. Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's just sad when the best wide receiver on your team, or the receiver with the best attitude and the least issues, is Jarvis Landry, a guy who's had issues in the past a lot with, why did the Dolphins not want him back? He kind of butted heads with a lot of guys there, and he's like the most, character dependable guy there. So that's just kind of sad, and it's interesting. Of course, he doesn't necessarily upgrade situations as far as quarterback goes, but that defense there is brutal. They're going to throw the ball. And we saw, like with Robbie Anderson last year, if you're a talented wide receiver and you're playing on a team that needs to throw the ball a lot, you will get the ball, you'll do something with it. Anderson did it last year. Corey Coleman will probably do it this year. In fact, I think that's a very good comparison. It's kind of what I think that it is. But I completely agree with you. I'm excited for Coleman this year. Very underrated guy. Could have a breakout season. He'll finally have the opportunity.
All right. Let's get to your guy.
All right, so now I want to talk about David Njoku. Here's a guy we've been really excited about. I'm not going to talk about him for a crazy amount of time. I'm just going to talk about, if you want to know a little bit more about him, you can also check out our tight end video. But I do want to talk about him, the 6'4", 246-pound first-round pick. He's very fast, guys. He's very athletic. One thing that I really want to hit home, and this is something that you wouldn't know. A lot of people, you look online, you do your research for fantasy, and you don't really know these sort of things. You can't really do research for these or find these stats unless you just simply know football. And that's that going back to the draft, there was a lot of talk that David Njoku was going to be the first tight end picked over Evan Ingram. Now, Evan Ingram was picked, and he went to the New York Giants, and he got all this hype, and he did all of this. But there was lots of talk, that David Njoku was the #1 tight end in the draft, and how amazing he was. And then he got overshadowed a lot by a historically good rookie season by Evan Ingram. This takes nothing away from David Njoku, who played simply on a very bad team. He gets a huge upgrade at quarterback this year. He goes from Deshaun Kaiser throwing him the ball to Tyrod Taylor. That's a phenomenal upgrade. I don't need to say anything. You just talked about the wide receiver situation, the tight end situation there. There's absolutely no tight end that's going to take his job. That's David Njoku's job, hands down. Unbelievably fast and athletic tight end who plays a lot like a big wide receiver and is a fantastic mismatch, especially in the red zone. You just talked about the mess at wide receiver. There's a chance now they're going to be going without Corey Coleman. They're probably going to be going without Callaway, and they could be going without Josh Gordon. And that could be a horrible wide receiving core. And then you look at the one guy there who feels like a safe pick right there is Jarvis Landry. He's really a PPR specialist, a possession wide receiver. They still need their big playmaker, and in my mind, that's hands down going to be David Njoku. I really like him for this year. We look at some stats last year. His 4.7 OTD was number 11 for the tight end position. That was a very good year. OTD stands out for opportunity adjusted touchdowns. This is simply a statistic that weighs or measures every carry and target and converts it into data that helps people, that will help us understand their scoring opportunity. How often are they getting a chance to score? Well, last year his 4.7 was 11, so that was impressive. That was nice. He also had 8 red zone targets, which was number 7 among tight ends. I think that number could far grow. I think could do far better or have a far increase from years past. And one thing that we talk about, I said I wasn't going to talk too much about him, and this is one of those things where you just go watch our tight end rankings video. We talk a lot more about it, but I don't want to waste too much time on this. Rookie tight ends struggle. Historically, rookie tight ends aren't great. And that's not the fault of these guys that you're looking at, like David Njoku didn't have a fantastic fantasy season, but simply it's hard being a rookie tight end. Playing under systems, they have to learn both the blocking schemes of the offensive line and the receiving schemes and the passing schemes in the game, like in the passing game. And so it's a lot to learn. It takes very long time to develop. In fact, again, I mentioned this a lot on this channel. Only 3 tight ends have ever had over 500 yards and 5 touchdowns their rookie year. David Njoku had almost 400 yards and 4 touchdowns. It was a rather impressive rookie season when you consider the situation that he was in. I have a feeling he's going to make huge improvements this year and be a very solid tight end.
Yeah, I like him for a lot of reasons. We've talked about him quite a bit last year. You're right. Not only was he a rookie, but DeShone Kizer was historically bad last year. That hurt quite a bit. I was already big on this guy, but with the recent developments in Cleveland, you're right. This guy's going to see a lot of targets. He's suddenly a guy that I'm looking at is going to be creeping up close to the top 10s very soon. I love this guy. I think you're going to have a huge breakout year there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Rob, who's your next guy that you're going to talk about?
So my next guy I'm going to talk about, my next breakout player is Tyler Lockett. Now, so for players to break out, they need really a few things to happen. They need opportunity, situation, talent, and for a wide receiver, he needs a good quarterback. And with him, you can check all 4 boxes here, right? Okay, let's look at quarterback. Good quarterback, check. Not only does he have a good quarterback, he's got a great quarterback in Russell Wilson. You're rated as the second best fantasy quarterback out there. Russell Wilson is a great quarterback, so that's going to help. Opportunity, check. He's got that. Paul Richardson departed for Washington, okay? And that leaves Lockett as the number 2 guy there. Another thing is Jimmy Graham left. Jimmy Graham had 10 touchdowns last year, and some of those targets and touchdowns are going to go to other players like Baldwin and Lockett and some others, so I think that bodes well for him. Also, he has talent. He's proven that when he is healthy, he can be that he is talented, he can be productive. He shined as a rookie. He was explosive. He finished his rookie campaign with 8 touchdowns, 6 receiving, 1 in a kick return, and 1 in a punt return. He had 51 catches and 664 yards as a rookie. Those are really good numbers for a rookie wide receiver. They're not great, but those are solid numbers. So what happened? Well, heading into 2016, he was actually ranked pretty highly, but he struggled to stay healthy. He was slowed by a knee injury in 2016, and then he sustained a compound fracture at the end of his second season. That really hindered him going into 2017 last year. Now, Pete Carroll came out and said this. He believes Tyler Lockett is finally all his way back to 100% healthy. Went on to say that he appeared in all 6 games last year, but Carroll admits he was never quite right. Last year, he struggled all the time. Throughout the season, he was not able to do things he could do before. He was never 100% healthy. He's back. He's healthy. He said he's playing fast. He has no restrictions at all in the game. And we think that we can see him really have a great year here. Another huge boost for him and why I think he's out for a big break year is probably the biggest and most significant change in the offseason for Seattle was what?
Just the huge departures in that defense. I mean, I don't know if I've ever seen so much talent and so many star players leave a defense in 1 year. You talk about the guys. Rob, this is your notes. You have it written down. Who all left?
Well, Sherman's gone. He's not gone yet, but Thomas is looking at saying no, he wants a long-term deal to be traded so he could miss the season. Cam Chancellor's gone. Sheldon Richardson's gone. Sheed's gone. Defensive end Avrill's gone. Just on and on and on. They've lost a lot of guys on defense. And even if you watch second half of last year, that defense struggled quite a bit, meaning they're going to need to score points to win games this year. It's going to put a lot of pressure on the offense to throw the ball. I think that's greater statistics for Wilson, greater numbers for Tyler Lockett there. That bodes well for him is not just having a good quarterback, but the type of quarterback that Russell Wilson is, right? So Tyler Lockett's got a lot of speed. He likes to get downfield. And for a guy like him that uses his speed, it can benefit from a quarterback that can scramble and buy time for him to get deep, to get into that second level, to get behind the coverage, behind the corner safety, things like that. Russell Wilson has the ability to do that. Another thing that's a huge bonus for this guy, unrelated to why he's going to be a breakout, but just something I think that's a benefit, his average draft position, he's not in the top 60 wide receivers in mock drafts. So when I look at this guy, I think he'd have a breakout year. Now, I want to say this. I'm not saying I'm huge on this guy beyond 2018, but for this year, I'm confident that this year he has 1,000 yards receiving. I think this year he finally puts it together and really breaks out.
Exactly. You just talk about system. Sometimes it's just the system that matters for a player. We've seen it in years past, and this is it. Fantastic quarterback. Really, how many other quarterbacks in the NFL would you take over Russell Wilson to throw you the ball? Maybe Aaron Rodgers, maybe Tom Brady, maybe Drew Brees. He's a top 5 guy. He's unbelievably talented. I like you talk about the system. You talked about how good he is at buying time. That's huge. Talk about that's a weak run blocking offensive line, a very struggling running game that just has yet to get it done, and honestly doesn't impress me going into this season. It's not just what is going to be honestly an awful defense. It's a bad running game. Everything falls on Russell Wilson to win the games for that team. And so that's huge for Tyler Lockett. I mean, late in the fourth quarter and the second half, when they're down by a ton, Tyler Lockett's going to get lots of targets. I completely agree with you. He may not be the most talented guy, but he's a fast wide receiver. He's going to be able to make some plays, and Russell Wilson's certainly going to help him do that. People are seriously underlooking him. It's crazy. So I like that pick a lot. That was very solid.
All right, so let's get to your next guy.
All right, so now I want to talk about the Indianapolis Colts running back Nyheim Hines. This is a guy who was taken in the 4th round, and I think because he was a 4th-round pick and playing on not a great offense, there are a lot of names in that running back situation. A lot of people are just like, oh, okay, we're going to stay away. We don't like that. It makes us nervous. I, however, think that he has the possibility to be fantastic. He kind of reminds me of Alvin Kamara. Now, I'm not saying he's going to have that sort of season, but he's a guy who I'm looking at for a few reasons. I'm looking at one because he's unbelievably talented. He's explosive, he's elusive, he's fast, he's agile, and he does a ton of damage as a pass catcher. He's fantastic in that area, so I very much like his ability to stay on the field for that. At the very least this season, he's a 3rd down back. That backfield has been a mess, but I think that could seriously improve when Andrew Luck comes back. Let's be honest, without Andrew Luck there, with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback, they're one of the worst 4 offenses in the NFL. And it's quite ugly. But with Andrew Luck has had seasons where he's thrown 40 touchdowns. With Andrew Luck, they're a playoff team and a very good offense. He is a great quarterback. There's no denying it. And if Andrew Luck plays, which it looks like he will, we just watched preseason games. He went out, he played, and he looked very good. No concerns there whatsoever. That could drastically raise Hines' value, especially, again, being that pass catcher out of the backfield. I want to talk about some things from his NFL Combine. Here are just some of the things that they said about him. His experience as a lone running back and a slot receiver. So he plays a lot in that single back set. That's very good. Has home run potential. Ran some. In his last year in college, he ran some super long touchdowns, 48 yards, 50 yards, 54 yards, 83 yards, 79 yards. He just had some huge explosive runs for touchdowns. He's really comfortable keeping outside of the tackles. A lot of people have concern that he's smaller. He is only 5'8", 198 pounds, but I'll come back to that in a minute. They say that he plays very tough and gains yards after contact. He has great hands and route running and is very focused in the pass-catching game. He loves playing in an open backfield, going to be under a new and improved O-line, and like I said, Andrew Luck is a huge boost there. But the one thing that's always been a knock on him is that he's just a smaller guy. People are very nervous. How physical is he? How is he going to be able to, be a solid every down running back? And I genuinely think that he could be the every down running back for that team. And I'll tell you why. He's not huge, but every once in a while we see a guy like Jamal Charles. Last season we saw Alvin Kamara be able to be not just a pass-catching back at that size, but also be able to run the ball. And Hines is that guy. In college, he had 2.4 yards after contact. That's good for any running back. That's good for a big running back. That's good for a bruiser. And you talk about a guy who's more leaning towards being a great pass catcher and being a speedy back who can also get you 2.4 yards after the contact. I mean, that's There's not much to say about that. When I found that out, that to me really secured the fact that he could have a good season. Now, because he's a rookie, a lot of people are going to say, was he really a breakout player? And I was honestly hesitant to put him in this video because of that. He wasn't in the NFL last year, so how could he be a breakout player? Well, for one, he wasn't in the NFL, which means he had zero value to anyone, so that's good. I know that if you're in keeper leagues, I know 100% fact he'll be out there. Obviously, no one can keep him as a rookie. I like that about him. And also, for me, he's not Saquon Barkley. The hype on him isn't huge. And so I think that he could break out or break past the expectations. He's a guy who's very underrated and oftentimes even going undrafted in some leagues. And so I wanted to put him on this list for that reason. I'm very excited about him. As always, rookie running backs are a risk. You take a lot of chances, you take a lot of shots. He's by no means a safe pick. He's not. But I feel that he could definitely have a breakout season. I'm very excited about him, especially if Andrew Luck plays the sort of role that he could play in that offense. Could be huge.
Yeah, I think by the very definition of a breakout player, no breakout player can be a safe pick, honestly, because the whole idea is that they were marginal in the past. And so that a safe pick is somebody that you can trust that's performed consistently. So I would agree with you there. It's all about opportunity, and I think right now Marlon Mack is banged up. Sounds like he's going to miss the rest of the preseason. And so that's going to open the door for this guy to show what he can do.
Robert Turbin as well, suspension.
Suspended for 4 games, so yeah, there you go.
So yeah, again, because he's a rookie, I didn't want to put him on this list, but I was looking at him. I'm excited about him. I absolutely believe that he could have a good season, but it's not a safe pick. Rob, who's your next guy you're going to talk about?
So for my final breakout player, it's Will Fuller, former first-round pick, 21st overall, right? He's been marginal and ineffective. Now, it's mostly due to injuries and health concerns, right? But undoubtedly, this guy has talent, so we'll look at that real quick. Is he talented enough to be a breakout player, to be a great player? I think so. Look at the first 2 weeks in 2016 as a rookie, right? He had 1 week, he had 5 catches, 107 yards, 4 catches, 104 yards. During that same 4 games, he had 2 touchdowns. In week 4, he had 7 catches, 81 yards. So those first 4 weeks, he was great. Last year, 2017, he was banged up a little bit to go out to join the team, but when he finally got on the field, with him and Watson healthy, in 4 games, he had 7 touchdowns. The last game, his targets increased, and so did his yardage. He had 5 catches, 125 yards against Seattle. He runs a 40-yard dash in 4.28 seconds. This guy's got blazing speed. In fact, last year, the length of his touchdowns show you the type of speed that he has and the ability to get behind coverage and score some long touchdowns. He had a touchdown that was 48 yards long, 39, and 59. So of his 7, 3 of those were long touchdowns. All of his touchdowns were outside single digits in terms of yardage. This is a guy that's got a lot of speed, right? Struggles to stay healthy, so that's the big issue. Can he stay healthy so he can finally put it all together and break out this year? Well, reports out of Houston are he put on a lot of muscle in the offseason, okay? And they think it's going to change his game considerably. They went on to say that in the offseason, okay, that he began to work out with some people at Notre Dame. He bulked up. He ate a diet that was endorsed by Director of Sports Nutrition, Ladd Harris. So they put his diet together, right? He was more consistent in working out with Senior Director of Sports Performance, Luke Richardson. On lifting weights, he's helped the speedy wideout gain 15 to 20 pounds are his kind of estimates, okay? The coach for Houston said this, that strength is going to improve his level, that body weight is going to be significant for him when he's on the field. I think it takes time. You come from college to the pros, everything's relatively new, nutrition, weight room, things like that. So I think he's really done a good job of buying into what Luke is telling him in the weight room. Now, the concern with the extra weight gain was, would he lose that speed that he relies so much on? But they're saying as of now, he's put on the extra weight, but he hasn't lost any speed at all. I think that's important. I think he's been consistent. And also, an important thing that the coach had commented on was with the extra strength that he now has, he's able to muscle cornerbacks out of his path at the line of scrimmage when they press him in coverage. So I think that's going to be important. He's a more complete player now at 185 pounds while maintaining his speed. Coach also went on to say he's a very, very good route runner. He's really good. I think because of injuries, we haven't been able to see all that he can do on the field. I think the big thing for him is that he's back, he's stronger, put some weight on. I think he's doing some things in training camp he's never done before. I think he's poised to have a great season. I think another thing that benefits well is not the coach, it's something that we've talked about before too. So much about it, I don't care if it's garbage time statistics, stats are stats, numbers are numbers in fantasy football. I don't really care when they get them. And so I always like to look at the defense of the team that they're playing on. So Houston last year, their defense was last in the NFL in points allowed. Now I think that defense is going to step up. I think they're going to make a marked improvement this year. They can't be as bad as they were last year, right? But I think he still benefits from the fact that defense is not a top-notch defense there. So when I look at this guy, I think he's due for a breakout. And the final thing I want to add to why I think he's poised for a big season Okay. You look at Hopkins. DeAndre Hopkins is going to draw all the double teams. He's going to get a lot of attention. He is a great wide receiver, probably the second best in the NFL right now, behind Antonio Brown. And so that's going to leave Fuller in single coverage. I think this is the year that he begins to be part of that conversation of being an all-pro wide receiver. I think this is the year that Will Fuller breaks out and puts it all together.
Exactly. You know, I understand some people get nervous because of injuries, and I get nervous too. But you can't let that blind you or keep you from taking him. You want to look at a wide receiver like, let's talk about Keenan Allen. Out of every receiver in the NFL, he is the most injury prone. He has struggled more than anybody else that I can think of. And it made people nervous, and they passed on him. And you know what? Last year, after years of injuries, he finally played a full healthy season. He was phenomenal. So don't just assume because he's been injured in the past he'll be injured again. Will Fuller is far healthier than Keenan Allen. We've even seen that Keenan Allen has been able to finish out a whole season. So I just think some people, I've been seeing a lot lately that people are avoiding players because of past problems or because of being burned in the past, or players have disappointed in the past. Like, don't make that mistake, guys. He's such an unbelievable tight end. You can't deny the talent. He had 7 touchdowns in 4 games, or he was just phenomenal. A good quarterback in Deshaun Watson, good system. Gotta love it. But I'm excited to talk about my final player here as well.
Yeah, before we switch over, in order to win fantasy, we mentioned it before, you got to be willing to take some chances. Now, we're talking about calculated risk. You got to be smart in the chances you take, but you got to take some chances. So
yeah. All right, so now here we come to my final pick, and I actually went with the Atlanta Falcons defense. I know we're talking about players, but we haven't talked a lot about defense, and I want to talk about Atlanta. They're an extremely underrated fantasy defense going into this season. Last season, they had the 5th best defense, but only the 25th best fantasy defense. They were simply not a good fantasy team at all last year, and so people forget that, again, they were the 5th best defense as far as a combination of points per game and yards per game goes together. I measure defenses by a combination of the two and not just one or the other. Points per game is great, yards per game is great, but I want them both together, and so they were 5th best last year, with actually a very, very young defense that's going to improve. We'll talk about that more in a minute, but let's just talk about some of the names on that defense. Extremely underrated. McKinley Takaris, unbelievably underrated defensive end right there. Vic Beasley, another young guy. Jarrett Grady, also very good options. Talk about Deion Jones. I think in a few years, Deion Jones is going to be considered the best linebacker in the NFL. I love Deion Jones. Go to that defensive backs, man. You talk about Desmond Trufant, Robert Alford, Alan Ricardo. There are some very, very talented players on that team. I'm not going to list off every player in their defense to you. There is no doubt in my mind that is one of the most talented defenses out there. As far as Vic Beasley, McKinley, Deion Jones, some of those guys, very, very young guys. This is an unbelievably young defense. In fact, just the fact that it's another year and they have more experience under their belt is enough of a reason to say that they're going to make improvements. So you have to ask yourself, why did they struggle in fantasy last year despite being such a good defense? Well, first of all, again, we'll come back to their defense is the same as last year. Their coaching is the same as last year. They're the same team, so we can expect the same sort of performance. Only we're going to see, I think, an increase in their fantasy value. And here's why. Talk about fantasy value comes from ability to force fumbles and to get interceptions, and they just struggled in that area. For whatever reason, they were able to hold teams down to a lot of points, but they only got 13 forced fumbles and 8 interceptions. And that 8 interceptions was just a fluke. And I hate to say, well, that was a fluke and it won't happen again, but they had 64 pass deflections and only 8 interceptions. That's far, far lower than a lot of other teams in the NFL. So we can expect those numbers to go up. Simply, we know that teams, for you to have good fantasy value, you have to force turnovers. You have to get after the quarterback. They got after the quarterback all right last year with 39 sacks. Again, that's going to improve. They have one of the youngest and most talented defensive lines in the NFL. I guarantee that's going to go up to at least 45 to 50. I mean, I hate to guarantee things, but they're only going to get better on that defensive line especially.
I want to add one point there. Vic Beasley last year is probably the best pass rusher, arguably, I suppose you would say, on that team. Last year, they struggled putting pressure on the quarterback, which, of course, pressure on the quarterback relates to sacks, fumbles, interceptions. They're going to move him this year back to his more natural position. They think that's going to increase his pressure on the quarterback and his sacks. So they've already talked about that specifically as one of the adjustments they're going to make.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, there's not a lot of stats for me to say I love their defensive line, Grady and Beasley and Takaris. There's not, but they're just unbelievably talented and they're unbelievably young. I cannot impress that on you enough. That I'm not just like trying to overhype them, and I am trying to hype them so you understand, but I'm not just like one of those hype guys. You know us on this channel. You know what we do. They really are a very good defense. One thing that I love, Dan Quinn's the coach there. He's the head coach, and you know what? He's a defensive-minded coach. He puts defense first. That's what they're focused on. That's what they do well. That's honestly, I think people don't realize it, but that's the identity of the Falcons. And then we come to that offense. We look at another team like the Baltimore Ravens, an unbelievable defense there in Baltimore, a defensive coach, but their defense struggles because of their offense. Poor offensive play, poor quarterback play, a little bit of struggle in the passing game and in the running game, and then you know what? That really hurts your defense. But that's not the case. Guys, that's not the case here in Atlanta. Matt Ryan is a good quarterback. Julio Jones, Calvin Ridley, Mohamed Sanu, they've got a good receiving core. They've got a very solidly developing tight end in Austin Hooper, a very good duo set of running backs there in Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman. That offense isn't a concern. That defensive talent isn't a concern. They're going to be another year older. They're going to be better, guys. I guarantee you that they're going to go from 25 to top 12. I think that you can start them most weeks as a fantasy defense. 25 was just kind of a fluke again, just struggled to get turnovers. Sometimes that happens. That's not going to happen this year.
Yeah, you talked about how a defense can be affected by their offense. I think a great example of that last year was Denver. Denver Broncos defense is very, very solid, but last year they struggled quite a bit. I think primarily because that offense was brutal. That defense spent a lot of time on the field. They're put in a bad position all the time. The games are close. That meant that the opposing offense could play more conservatively because obviously when Peyton Manning was there, they put points on the board. That caused the other quarterback to have to throw the ball. They could pin back their ears and put pressure on the quarterback. Last year, they couldn't do that. So you're right. I think that's a prime example. When you look at a fantasy defense, you also have to look at their offense on that team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely do. Talk about, like I said, they were able to do a lot of things. Able to get a lot of team tackles, 305 assisted tackles, really nice. Again, I can't pressure or impress that enough. It's just a good defense all around, and don't think that because last year they didn't force a lot of turnovers, get a lot of sacks, they're still going to have a good year this year. That's really I got to say about them, guys. Underrated defense.